Perfect.
Okay, Pete, could you please go back to your first slide?
Certainly, Tui. Yep.
Majid, are you able to text us on the chat and say you can hear and see the screen okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. Great.
All good?
Please.
Thank you, Tui.
Excellent. Well done. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining with us this afternoon. December was a big release, a big month for DataGene. It culminated with a number of things, and particularly our National Breeding Objective Review, and we had a number of other key updates that we also included in the run. So what we'll do over the next 40 minutes is go through, cover the key items individually, and then we'll look at how they came together collectively to produce our breeding values. So what was new? What things did we update in December? Well, we actually updated the key drivers for our main indices, our Balanced Performance Index, Health Weighted, and Sustainability Index. And that was the result of our NBO, National Breeding Objective Review. And that started 2 years ago, where we actually we have a process where every 5 years we actually go through and review our indices. So these are our main profit drivers, review our indices and update them based on new economic values. Are there other traits we need to add? And how relevant are the indices, and whether or not there are new indices? We also had a base update. So a base is a reference point. So the reference point are a group of animals within your population. And for this run, December, we actually updated the base, and I'll explain how that base moved and the impact it had across different breeds, because different breeds are on their own breed base. We also, it was work that was conducted at Dairy Bio. We also introduced a new survival model. And I'll run through the details of that. So we've had survival, ABV, as a trait for a number of years. What we've been able to do is enhance that, and I'll explain how we introduce survival, and also how survival can vary according to breed. So it's not one size fits all now. We've modelled that according to breed. And an interesting one for this release was the introduction of the new intermediate optimum trait, and we'll explain how we got that, the reason why we got to that point, and how you can use those new indications on the optimum points of type. And also for the red breeds, we had an improved single step. So the red breeds have been running on a single step analysis since first introduced genomics, but we've also improved that model for red breeds. So what to expect? As somebody quoted to me once, you don't change something and have nothing change. But with hopefully the changes we can explain, and the changes are not upending the system, it's just making it more accurate and more predictive. So you will see some change in animal rankings. It's not that top animals go to bottom or bottom go to top, but there will be some re-rankings according to our new economic formulas, and particularly the mix of fat and protein that I'll cover. You'll see most people have, looking at either their bull values or their cow values, bigger values. So the spread moved, so our top animals went higher, but also the animals at the bottom went lower. So not only did we have some changes in animal ranking, but we also saw that our top animals moved up higher according to the pricing on some of our key traits. With the base update, those that are familiar with base updates will know that it is a reset. The base update itself doesn't change rankings. All it does is just move them generally down. As we improve a population and that population gains in certain traits, what we do is this is a reset. And it's generally done every 5 years. So most countries look at a base roll. Some do it annually, but we've elected to do it 5 years. But this is our first update since 2015. So there were some changes there. And part of that was that we saw, and I'll highlight that the table later, we saw some changes in, say, the fertility values of Holsteins. We know that we've gained significantly over the last 10 years. We have made gains in fertility, and what we've done is just adjusted that to the more modern cow. So for instance, most Holsteins moved backwards or down by 6 breeding or ABV points. So for instance, if a bull was 106 previously, that bull is now 100. So without anything else changing, the base change will actually move bulls. Or if a bull was 110, that bull is now 104. Smaller, so we had some smaller values for other traits, and interestingly, and I'll show how, our type ABVs went up. So that is generally contradictory to a base change, but I'll explain how that happened. Our new survival, that was work that has been conducted over the last 2 years by the Vic department, and what we saw was the introduction of what we call early survival and new survival, and analysing those two separately and then combining them. So we did see some changes in that, but it is a better estimate of productive life. What we're looking at with survival is to get an indication of how long that animal will last in the herd, and look at improving lifetime and lifetime productivity. And then, of course, we had the new expression of the intermediate trait optimums that Pete Thurn has done a lot of work with, and to identify areas within traits that are actually optimum. And it might surprise you that 100 is not always the optimum. 100 is actually the average of the breed for that trait, but it may not necessarily be the optimum. And to give people clearer indication as to what they can do to improve certain traits. And of course, for reds, we just updated our single step for reds, and that did cause some minor re-ranking, not massive, but just a few changes. So really, what our NBO review is there to do is to really make our indices ready for when our cows are milking. So if you look at where we are today, we've got bulls today, we've got semen we use today. The animals we produce are not actually going to lactate within the next 3 years. So we're looking at a 4-year period. So animals we breed today won't enter the milking herd for 3 to 4 years. So part of what we've done with the NBO is to forward project. So what will our industry look like in 3 to 4 years time? So what will the relative fat and protein ratio, what will the price be? Because we're breeding cows for 4 to 5 years forward. And of course, that will affect our 3 major indices: the balance performance, the health weighted, and the sustainability index. So it's a process that started some time ago, and those that have been with us as part of the journey, we had started back in April 2024, where we identified some key themes. We had discussion papers, compiled some economic statistics in terms of where we needed to be. We had an extended consultation period where we went out to key stakeholders in industry and discussed the options. determine the options to test, and then put the rubber to the road where we actually put the dollar values to the economic indices, update them, come up with an options paper, and then run tests just basically to see that our proposed indices are going to do exactly what we wish to do. And we can forward project that too. And then the implementation, which is where we are now, and those ABVs were introduced in the December 2 run. So that's really the culmination of what is in essence about 2 years work to prepare for that. So it's not something we rush, it's something we do take time with to make sure that we get it ready and fit for purpose in terms of what our dairy industry, Australian dairy industry, is looking for. So one of the key updates was the pricing and the I guess the relativities of our milk. So what we did, and this is a change for this run, we used the forecast milk pricing as well as retrospective. So previously we've tended to rely on what's happened retrospectively. So what was the milk price in the last 4 years? But we actually moved to a forward projection. So rather than look 4 years backwards, we're looking at 4 years forwards as well. So 2025, what will it look like? And what we found was that where previously we had a protein to fat ratio of 2 to 1, given in a graph I'll show you, given the pricing of products that our industry produces, we've actually now moved that more to parity. So 1 to 1 ratio, and that did move some animals around. So bulls that were very protein centric, I guess, relative to fat, that moved them back a little bit. And if you looked at animals that had more fat than protein, it actually moved them up a little bit. And we also updated the feed, the input and the labour costs, and that all adds up to what farmers receive for their milk. So when we looked at the forward projections on milk, we actually got help with that in terms of the fresh agenda. We actually went out and as I say, rather than look retrospectively at milk prices, we actually looked forwards. So some of these projections here. So what we've got is basically we've got the 4 main products. So skim milk, whey, and then we've got cheddar, and we've also got butter. And what we were able to see was the projections for the, I guess, the more protein based, the whey and the skim milk were fairly flat for the next 5 years. 4 years we weren't seeing an increase, but the increases were more toward the fat-based products. So hence fat got an increase in weighting, and that also pushed that up relative now. So we're looking at a 1-to-1 parity, so equal fat to equal protein. And you'll see with the ratio where it was more protein focused back as we move progressively forward, our projections were indicating that we were getting closer and closer to that 1-to-1. But we also accept that there's individual variation. So depending on where you are or the factory you are supplying, we will always see variation to that. Individual companies will pay slightly differently, but as an average across those 4-year projected years, we're looking more at that 1-to-1 parity. With our health weighted index, what we did was we actually added 2 new traits. So traits that were previously calculated as ABVs, so calving ease and gestation length. So rather than have them just as standalone traits, they are now included in the health weighted index. So animals with favourable calving ease or shorter gestation length will now move up slightly, and that reflects the index. So what we're looking for healthy more fertile cattle, and on that basis, generally cattle that are probably more suited to a pasture-based system. So part of the introduction of new traits is to actually look at where those traits fit in, what percent they make up of each index. And what we're able to see is that there weren't huge changes, but there was some slight changes. So with ASI, our production, you'll see that BPI, we're just sitting at about 42% of the index coming from production. Health weighted a little less. And if we look at the sustainability index, that's just over 50 at 51%. And if you look at the relativities of the other traits, you'll see that I guess we've always, particularly health weighted index, we've always had more emphasis on fertility there. So that's not surprising to see that. And likewise, workability and for type. So there are differences between the indices, and that highlights bulls that are certainly better to improve traits within those. And then part of the projection is to look at what we can expect going forward. And in the case of when we look at our production traits, if you look at protein, for instance, because now protein's moving rather than 2-to-1 back to a 1-to-1, you'll see a slight drop in the gains in protein over time, but that will be offset by the gains in butterfat. And likewise survival, you'll see that the enhanced survival will actually improve that trait over the foreseeable generations, the next 3. And other traits, not massive changes. And if you look at certain traits, you look at stature, for instance, we're not expecting to see any great change there. It's important that we project these things because we don't want to change something and have something else break. So an important part of releasing a new index or indices is that they're not breaking something. So this is part of our bench test where we actually look to make sure that it's doing exactly what we want across all traits. Now this run, as I mentioned at the start, an important update was that we actually updated our base. So that's the reference animals within each particular breed that we use as a reference point. Previously, that reference point were animals born in 2011, plus or minus 2 years. So basically, we had a range from 2009 to 2013. In this run, we actually updated that to a more modern base. So the base is now 2020, and that's plus or minus 2. So 2018 through to 2022. And we're committed now to an annual 5-year roll. So the impact, it basically resets. So certain breeds, individual breeds are treated separately. And you'll see generally the giveaway is that where a particular breed has made gain, you'll see that the adjustment is larger. So if a breed or for a particular trait has not made gain, the base roll doesn't make much difference. And the ABVs go up. So I'll explain that in a couple of slides we've got coming as to why that happened. But there's no impact on animal rankings. So a base roll affects all animals within the breed similarly. So you don't see any re-ranking of animals based on a base roll. So here's some of the key changes. So for instance, if we look at Holstein, so if we look at protein, we actually saw, we adjusted the base. So every animal got moved down by 3.3 units, and likewise fat 8.7. And if you look at, for instance, things like somatic cell, likewise SCC moved down about 28, so every animal lost that. A key talking point with Holstein was fertility. And the good news is for Holsteins, yes, we have made gain, and all animals, male and female, moved back by 6 ABV units. So that was significant from the point of view that really reflected the gain that we've made over time. If you look at other breeds, Jersey's actually moved more on production. So we saw a bigger base roll for Jerseys on protein, similarly for fat, that was similar to the Holstein fat. But if you look at Jersey fertility, we didn't see much change over that 10-year period. So the base roll really didn't affect the Jerseys as much. So if a bull was 104 previously, he's still 104. And you'll go through, so that table is available for people that want to see, but it's a fairly standard thing with a base roll. Each breed moves slightly differently, but as I say, the biggest gain, for instance, is in the traits, or the biggest movement of the traits where you've made the most gain. Now, what happened with type? Type actually went up, and to explain that, our previous type base, and this is this representation here, our previous type base were actually the daughters of, so the classified daughters of AI bred sires. And that was our base for quite a number of years. But what we were finding was that base was becoming a highly selected base. So the classification results we were getting in were basically from registered herds, and the standard of which those cows, the base was becoming quite a narrow base and quite a high base. So what we did was according to ICAR, we actually opened up our base to all animals within the same breed. So rather than just be animals that were AI bred, we opened up the base to all animals, so animals sired by natural service bulls. And what that did was it actually moved our average number back slightly, and it widened the base. So the base was becoming quite narrow and quite elite, whereas what this did was move that base backwards slightly. So you'll find that bulls that were evaluated previously, you'll find in December have actually moved up without doing anything else, have moved up slightly for type. So that base we had based on our registered cows, typically what we had was, better udders, taller cows, shorter teats, shallower bodies, narrower chests. Whereas when we moved to the upper base, it actually widened that. So most bulls, again, you'll see that the Holstein overall type went up by 3.8 points. Jersey went up similarly, 3.8. Mammary system, Holstein 5.4. And Jersey 4.6. So again, with a base, it just adds to the number. So if a bull was 100 previously for overall type on a Holstein, that bull is now close to 104. So each trait you'll see has a slightly different adjustment, but that's now included in the new roll. Now, an important introduction for this particular release was the updating of the survival model. And importantly, what we did was, and that was done after quite a bit of study of data, we actually split survival. So rather than just look at survival as the chance of an animal going from one lactation to another, we actually looked at survival in terms of early survival. So what are the key traits that influence heifers or early survival as compared to late survival? And what we found is there are different traits that come in at early stage and different traits that come in at late stage. And what we've done is identify those, and also differences to breed. So what affects Holstein survival is slightly different to the traits that affect Jersey. So the new survival is more predictive. It makes use of a lot more data. So termination codes from herd test centres, we're able to use a lot more of that information. And the ABV again is average of 100 for each breed, and more than 100, like 105, means longer herd life. So typically, when we look at survival within a herd, so we've got first lactation heifers, generally at about 26, 27% of the herd, you'll see a natural drop-off over time, and that's what we expect to cows that are the older animals. So what we've been able to do is analyse that, so early survival and late survival, and combine them together. So if we were to look at, say, Holsteins, if we looked at the survival prediction, now the yellow, to explain, the yellow is the early survival, and the blue is the late survival. So what you'll see is that there are, and where you see the differences between those two dots, that actually shows you the difference between early and late survival. So say, for instance, if we look at the yield traits like milk, fat and protein, early survival, it's important. So yield is actually quite important in terms of a cow surviving. But once that cow's in the herd, her yield becomes less important in terms of her survival. So there are other things in that cow that actually have a bigger effect. So if we look at somatic cell, as we know, as a cow gets older, generally her somatic cell increases. So for instance, late survival, somatic cell was far more influential in late survival in Holsteins than it was in early survival. And then things like udder depth. You've obviously got young cows here where it is important, but not so much. As you get to late survival, udder depth becomes more important. So that was an interesting observation. And if we look at the similar thing with Jersey, we see for each trait, again, compare the dots where they're similar. But when you looked at things like production, it was actually more important in the Jerseys than it was the Holsteins in early. And if you look at things like mammary, it was almost equivalent to early to late. So that was a very interesting study, and that's happened over the last year and a half. And we're able to look at including those survival traits, including early and late survival, blending them and coming up with a more predictive trait. So what we see is that there was some change in Holstein, not massive, but there was some movement, a little over 2.6, so just under 3 ABV points. 2/3 of the bulls didn't change by that much, so you're not going to notice a huge difference, but there were some bulls that I guess tended to move a little more, depending on particularly their focus on early or late survival. And some extreme changes, but that was a very, very small number. So really with survival, it was an enhancement of the trait, just a fine tuning, but it's certainly giving us a more predictive view of the way animals will last in herds. Now, an important introduction to this particular run is what we call intermediate optimum type. So if we look at intermediate optimums, we've focused on the traits. They work for those traits where either extreme is not what's desired. So if we were to look at things like pen set, or rump pin set, you don't want extremely high and you don't want extremely low, but you want an intermediate trait. So they're the traits that were focused, and particularly rear teats. There's been a lot of focus recently or over the last few years on rear teat placement. Basically, if we look at the cow pictured, we've done a really good job of moving that teat from outside of the udder, on the edge of the udder pointing out, to progressively moving in. And this is one trait where we've actually, if we keep going, and we've all seen examples of that, where the teats actually finish up coming close to each other and in fact touching or crossing. So part of what we've done with the intermediate type is to indicate where some of these areas are and to help breeders avoid. So for instance, if you've got a rear teat issue too close, using a bull with a high rating, in other words, where the teats are close, are not going to help you fix your issue. And that's what we want to indicate, that it's not necessarily the bulls with the highest breeding values that give you the desired outcome. So which traits were basically the traits where the midpoint of that trait is actually the preferred. So these were the traits we identified. So it's not either end that you want, it's actually the intermediate. And it's not that simple because we've got certain things that influence it, and particularly there are some breed differences. And I guess the point is that when you look at 100 for a breeding value for these traits, the 100 does not represent an intermediate point. So if you were to look at, say, rear teat placement, the 100, a bull that's currently 100, it doesn't indicate that the teats are in the center of the quarter. In fact, the 100 indicates the average of the breed. And at the moment, it might surprise people, but for Holstein, that average on a 1 to 9 linear cow scale sits at about 7.3. So a bull that gets 100 for rear teat placement, those rear teats are sitting at a 7, around about just over 7, which is actually leaning, starting to angle in. So if people want a bull that's actually putting teats in the center of the quarter, we'll show you how we indicate that. So here we are. There are breed differences. So if we look at rear teat placement, what we've really put together is that, as I say, 100 for rear teat placement is the average of the breed. But if we were to look at the absolute point where you want to be, it's not 100, it's actually below that. So it sits at between 93 and even lower. So what we do is, for that particular trait, we indicate O for optimum, and then wide if it's actually below 84 or higher than 84, we actually indicate that with a C. And likewise for each of the traits, and it's probably easier if I show you the bull proof, it actually more clearly indicates that. But it's really highlighting to people that the 100 or the average for that breed may not correspond to optimum. So we're showing those traits where that's not the case. And likewise with Jersey, again, same traits. We look at some of the differences. In the case of Jersey, for instance, though, if you look at rear teat placement, the 100's not far off. So where Holstein, we're looking at a 93 as optimum. Jersey was 99. So basically, you'll see bulls below 96 get a W, indicating wide rear teat placement. Bulls above 100 will get a C, indicating close. And likewise, our red breeds. So each breed. Reds were probably more similar to Holstein. And what we've now got, and I'll show you how that looks. So if we were to look at, say, a DataVat page now, what we've got is that if we look at, say, again, rear teat placement, we have, say, 102. Now, that's relative to where, the 93. So we're indicating that with a C. So that's 102, but that's more toward the close range. The front is more toward the wide, so we're giving that a W. And then if we look at something like rear set of rear leg, that's more toward the curve side, so we'll indicate that with a C, and likewise the trait. So we'll show that udder depth, for instance, 108. Well, that's certainly above breed average. That falls into the shallow category. So it's more descriptive. So what we're doing are taking the numbers and actually putting descriptions next to them, so that hopefully people looking at those proofs. So if somebody wants to widen rear teats, for instance, even this bull at 102, we're indicating that's toward the close end. So it's actually more toward close. So this would not be the bull, and certainly you would not use a bull that's 115, because that will be very close. So with our moving on to the reds, basically the reds have been running on a single step. Part of our single step process, including genomics, is that we've also included overseas mace breeding values. So it's a world first integration of mace into the single step breeding system. And what we found was our previous estimates on particularly protein on overseas animals were a little higher. So what this has just adjusted that so that the overseas animals, particularly the mace breeding values, are being incorporated, but removing any overestimation on protein. And of course, that protein would feed into ASI. So in some cases, you can expect to see a slight reduction in breeding values for some of the overseas bulls. Probably not so much the bulls that have got milking daughters here in Australia, but more so for the bulls that are either overseas only or bulls that were genomic. So in other words, young sires that don't have lactating daughters. So there were quite a number of changes, and part of that is that for each of those changes, we've prepared a series of learning resources. So we've got information that we can help you with in terms of better understand if you want to drill down into particular individual things. We've prepared some fact sheets, tech notes, case studies. So it's really to better explain what we did, the reasons why, but also the impact and what farmers will see or what service providers will see in terms of the end result. So they're available. So go to the DataGene website, and there's a section on learning resources up here, and feel free to download and to click on those, and also the pocket guide. Now the pocket guide will be updated as well. So we'll be doing that very similarly in the new year. Part of the effort, it all came together in December. Part of the effort really was the culmination of a huge team effort over nearly 2.5 years. So it started really with the Genetic Evaluation Standing Committee, and also we had our research team that had to go through and research existing traits, new traits, support data. There's a huge, and of course we work with Abacus Bio to pull all that together and turn them into to breeding values, but more importantly to test and make sure that they would be fit for purpose and relevant for the next 5 years. So yeah, it's been a really important process. As I say, it's looking at the impact. You don't change things and have nothing change. There were some changes, but it's not an upending. Our top herds are still top herds. Likewise, our top bulls are still top bulls, but it has separated some out of others, as well as moving others down. So, so with that, we thank everybody that was involved, and it was a huge project, and one that we were very pleased to see come to fruition. But we're certain there'll be the questions, and we're more than willing to talk to people, talk to groups, and to have those discussions. So, so with that, have we any particular questions? We've got a few of our staff PTs on board and a few others. Any questions you'd like to throw at our team? So if Laura can unmute people. Again, Daniel, I see.
Can you hear me there, mate?
Yeah, we can now, Daniel. Yes, yeah, we can.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. We've had a couple of queries in relation to the changes, and they relate to export heifer cattle. And I just wanted to get some feedback on any communication DataGene may have had with the export industry, who have set prices of cattle based on their breeding values. With this change that has impacted some producers, and I'm not sure if exporters are aware or have reset their guidance as it relates to that. So yeah, just do we know if the exporters are across these details and what the flow is?
Yep, good question. Yep, I'll throw to Pete Thurn if Pete's on board there, because I know Pete's been involved with some of the exporters. It's by changing something, you always finish up caught in something, and I know there was a particular export shipment where heifers went in based on the old values, but of course are now being judged on the new values. So, and we did see them, Pete, some went up and some went down, didn't they?
Yeah, and this particularly I think relates to the current shipment that's heading to Turkey, and I think so. So in terms of the communication, yes, the people behind that particular shipment understood the potential for movement between the old system and the new system, and we'd had a number of conversations with them. As a general rule, I think animals have probably gone up a little more than I think there's more animals have gone up than than have gone down. So it's actually maybe not necessarily working in the exporter's favour. It's probably working more in the farmer's favour. However, in some individual circumstances, there are certainly some herds that have been impacted a little less positively than others. But there was no doubt that prior to the December release, there'd been a number of conversations with that particular exporter on the potential for this to happen. The issue they had, though, was they wanted to move animals off farm before the proof release, which meant that farmers in some respects didn't have the opportunity to pick and choose which animals, or see the results prior to and pick and choose which animals ended up going to Portland, and I think that's created some of the issue.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, not expecting DataGene to do everything for everyone. It was more just what the breadth of the conversation was, because I know there was some disgruntled producers, and I didn't want that carrying over to the perception of the updates.
Yeah, and I think there's also in this, Daniel, I think there's layers as well. So in terms of whilst maybe the primary exporter was across this, some of the agents working underneath them may not have been as well briefed. So I kind of accept that, but then it comes down to, well, was that our job or was that the exporter's job? And if, in this case, but certainly the primary exporter was well and truly aware of what was going on.
Thanks, Pete.
With any update, it is just a timing issue from the point of view that you have to introduce an update, and at some point this particular shipment was 1 foot either side. But as we get into next year, of course, the animals will be all judged on the new updates, so we won't see that going forward. So have we any other questions on base rolls, fertility, observations for those people that have had a look at their cow values or bull values? Any particular observations that they would like to make?
Trevor has a question, Pete.
Trevor? Yep, good.
Trevor's on mute by looks.
Trevor, you can, if you unmute, you can see if we can unmute. Do we have to unmute Trevor, or does he have to unmute himself?
Try that one. There we go.
Yeah,
Can
good.
you hear me?
Can you hear now, Trev? Yep, all
Yep.
good.
Couple of points. Most factories are no longer doing a volume charge, so the negative weighting on positive milk bulls within the ASI calculation, I understand we don't want extremes of either point. Was there any discussion in creating a bell curve or an optimum, around zero, be plus or minus 100 or 200 litres with no impact on their actual BPI contribution for litres? And I suppose the other is the some of the bulls that have moved more than 6 points. Where's been infertility? What's been the driver in that?
Good, excellent. Well, first question, yeah, volume. We obviously that's a question that comes up each year or regularly whenever we do the update. We did look at volume. If we looked at where we were with volume, we used to hit it in two ways. We did have a transport component, but we also had an energy component. We removed the transport component, but we've still retained the energy component. So it's not huge, but it's still there. There is a cost to producing more volume over time. The factories say that they don't levy people now. Discussions we've had with them, they actually still factor it into pricing. It's just not as obvious as what it used to be, but it is a discussion point, certainly with breeds such as Jersey.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's scope in future MBO reviews to find an optimum range of plus or minus. You want cows to be able to drive, and there is a philosophy that if a cow has no will to milk, regardless of her components or to create volume, we'll create a Kiwi cow that'll milk for 200 days. And we don't want that.
Trev, the bit we don't see, and like as Pete said, we account for the energy cost in the BPI and the HWI and the sustainability index as well. So the energy cost of creating a kilogram of fat, a kilogram of protein, and a litre of water, effective. And so the bit you don't see is the energy cost that we've already subtracted from the protein value and the fat value, because they're positive already. So, you've already got, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but let's say 6 kilos, $6 for protein, and let's say $6 for fat. And then from that, we subtract the energy cost, and you still end up with a positive number. If you don't put a value on milk, a positive value on milk, so it starts at 0 because the factories don't factor that into milk payments. When you take away the energy cost, you end up with a negative number.
Right.
And that's the bit that creates consternation. Now, the only way around that, you end up coming out at the same place, would be to work with things like, energy corrected milk and this sort of thing. And that then becomes really messy in terms of how you explain that to people. So, and just the other point on milk is, it's 9 in the equation at the moment, it's 9 cents a litre. So minus 9 cents a litre. In the previous BPI, it was minus 8 cents a litre. But relative to, as a ratio of milk to fat and protein, it's actually the penalty is actually relatively less in the new BPI than what it was in the old BPI. Even though it may not seem like that when you look at when you look at the bull rankings and things like that, but relative to the amount of fat and protein that that are contributing to the BPI, the milk penalty is actually less.
Yep.
And part of that too, Trev, on the milk, part of the projection, that 3-generation or 10-year projection, was that the milk didn't really change. So it wasn't, even though we've got a negative weighting on it, we're not expecting milk to change overly. So we're not seeing a continued drying up of the milk pool, so to speak, but increasing what's in milk, but not necessarily milk volume.
Yeah, I suppose I'm more concerned about our total protein kilos in our population. We've developed over 40 years a very high component protein cow. And the current emphasis, when you look at the top of the tree where I play in, they're very low in protein. And, as globally, we are short of protein regardless of where it's sourced from. And the current rankings would indicate that protein's not a hugely important factor in our elite animals.
Good. And on the second point, Trev, the Holsteins, for instance, had the base adjustment of 6 points. Where you see movement beyond the 6 points, because it's part of the animal model, and Pete and I look for this, and Tui look for this all the time. Every bull moved backwards by 6 points. Some moved more, but that was more due to the fact of information we're picking up from real live sources. So bulls that have currently got daughters that are being mated, joined, preg test results coming through, and also interbull, a better integration of interbull fertility. So what we found was that there were some bulls moved more than 6, generally not that many, but related to the fact of what's happening today. So for instance, what is that bull was not so much for old bulls, but certainly for younger bulls with smaller numbers of daughters.
And I mean, I appreciate that, Pete, but I mean, and it's hard to look at individuals specifically, but one particular bull I bred had started at 100 or 99 on genomics for daughter fert, got up to 107.
Yep.
So on actuals is now on the new system 95.
Yep.
And I realise, speaking on individuals is always fraught with danger, but it's just if you've had real life data actually improve his daughter fertility ranking, and then the new system's now taken sort of 12 or 14 points out, and I suppose that's the other one. What's the impact of cow performance on fertility? So if you've got a cow that's having a calf every 12 months, what impact is that actually having on her fertility score?
That will actually help her score and help her size. So what we do is we pick up mating dates, and they can be multiple mating dates, and then we pick up a calving date, and from that we can work out the successful joining date. So from that we can work out the fertility of that cow, but also we're picking up preg check results. So where people are actually getting pregnancy results on cows, early results. We likewise, and I know Tui, there was quite a bit of research done to, particularly back when you're working with Jenny, to pick up a lot of that fertility information coming from preg check results. So, but yeah, it does certainly impact the cow, and then she will impact her sire.
Yeah. Oh, it's just we've got, elite cows that have had 5 calves in a row sitting at 92, and you sort of scratch your head and you go, how is she nearly 2 basis points below the population? So just an observation on an individual basis. And I realise from a statistical perspective, that is a very fraught argument to weigh into. So,
yep. Excellent. Okay. Any other particular questions that people would, any discussion points that people would like to raise before we close? It is 1 o'clock, so we've just about done our hour. And for those that are approaching Christmas, well, that's also kidding. Okay, well, if not, thank you very much for joining with us today. There will be a recording of this as well as a previous recording that Pete Thurn did. We thank you very much for joining with us today. And any questions, feel free to send them through. We've got the learning resources. And above all, thank you for all those people that participated in our NBR review, both farmer and industry. And likewise, we wish you well for the new year and a happy and safe Christmas. So thank you, and we look forward to catching up with you in the new year. Bye.